pages of the photo album, and each page featured photos of tortured, mutilated people, concentration camp scenes from Hitler's Germany, naked men and women in skeleton bodies, bones protruding, eyes hollowed out, tormented faces staring up at hatchets about to land on their neck, and eyes filled with terror on every page, bodies cut into pieces like butchered steak, and mountains of corpses. Brent stared in horror at the photographs, many of them concentration camp scenes, where his fellow Jews had been tortured and annihilated. "This is what we do to our enemies, and we don't like the book Gail is writing, nor do we want you to get near her or to tell her that I'm a Jesuit, and that this is what we will do to Gail if you won't let me be your girlfriend and if you don't cooperate with me." She sat straight and tall, her eyes with a determined glaze, like the look of a cult religious leader who pronounced doom on all who would not follow her into a Jim Jones doomsday. Brent figured a Jesuit was some weird religious cult. What's the big deal about being a Jesuit? "'Cause I'm proud to be a Jesuit and wanted to show you what we can do to Gail. I belong to a very powerful organization." After viewing the photographs, he stayed up all night crying, staring at the ceiling of his bedroom as if staring into a forbidden abyss. He didn't know what a Jesuit was, but he had had personal experience with Loree and knew what she was. He decided to save Gail. He'd sacrifice himself, risk his life, and tolerate the presence of a human being who made him want to vomit. Loree's ability to break into his house at whim, to make copies of his house key even though he had not given his keys to anybody who could copy them for her, her ability to use brain control drugs on him, and most of all, her ability to come alive again after LeVar killed her, convinced Brent she could do as she damn well pleased. He had no doubt Loree would kill and torture Gail, just like he saw in those photographs. So he played her game, made public appearances with her, while he loathed every minute he had to see, feel, or hear the presence of this black widow spider. She hounded Brent every day. He was constantly running for his life. She met him everywhere, in his yard, his car, his workplace, everywhere. Sometimes she would just do something creepy like leaving a pile of burning dildos in his yard, or drawing penises all over the side of his house in lipstick. Other times she would surprise him by hiding in his car or closets and attacking him, slapping and scratching him like some kind of demon. She was like a cat with rabies. He couldn't even keep her out of his house. She always managed to break in somehow, as if she somehow got a copy of his house key. Despite her terror over his life, Brent never ever considered giving up Gail, though he was sure a lesser man would have. Brent felt shame that in January 1994, Paramount Studios sent Gail that letter saying to never write him again. It all started with her son, when he was in the hospital in July 1993 for asthma and pneumonia, right when Loree had him locked up in the basement and cut the lines to all his phones so that he couldn't call her. Gail was concerned that Brent gave her silence when her son was in the hospital in July 1993, and the hospital noticed her stress and referred her to their social worker. She confided to this social worker about Brent only if he would keep secret what she told him about Brent. He lied. The social worker wrote a report about Gail claiming she was crazy for believing that she and Brent had a relationship. Her husband got the social worker's statement in the mail in November 1993. Then her stupid and vulgar husband, when he read the social worker's statement in November 1993, demanded Gail give him the Paramount Studios address, which she did. She watched her husband compose an idiotic letter where he threatened to give Brent bad press if anyone from Paramount contacted Gail, while he threatened Gail with divorce if she ever wrote Brent again. In December 1993, Brent appeared to the front door of Gail's first-story apartment and whispered her name. He wanted to confirm to her how much she meant to him. in case Paramount did something because of her husband's letter. She peeked out her son's window, and Brent flashed the lights on and off inside a sparkling white truck he'd rented to drive out to her apartment so she could see him. He wore a disguise, a black wig with a black mustache. Then he backed out and zoomed out of the parking lot like lightning in his sparkling white truck. The Jesuits used Gail's husband to ignite a situation with Paramount by having him write that nasty letter to the studio. So in January 1994, Gail received a FedEx letter from Paramount Studios that ignited Jesus Christ. When Gail's ex-husband got the evil FedEx letter on Saturday evening, January 15th, he handed it to Gail and she read it. It forbade her to ever have any communications with Paramount Studios and accused her and her family of harassment. It also claimed that Brent never contacted her beyond an autograph photo. So disgusted by the lies in the letter, she mumbled to herself, "Brent never sent me an autograph photo. He sent me a letter." She noticed that Brent did not sign the FedEx letter, but felt disappointed in him because the letter made it to her apartment and her husband signed for it at the door. Her husband handed it over to her, and she read it, feeling that Paramount Studios betrayed her, and it confused her about Brent. It so upset her that she only got 3 hours of sleep that night. She did notice that Brent did not sign it and suspected sabotage. The next day she went to church quite upset. After church she prayed for 3 hours on her knees, stretched over her futon, from 1 to 4 in the afternoon, begging Jesus with tears to forgive her for disgracing his great name. "Oh, Jesus, I'm so sorry." She wiped her tears and cried some more, feeling humiliated and ashamed for all the passion and faith she had poured into Brent from 1991 to then, January 1994, because she responded to his romance on the phone, when he called her on the phone and made tender and passionate love to her, caressing her with his velvet voice. I should have had the character to never encourage Brent in any sort of romance because I'm married. I have disgraced your great name because I claim to be yours. Please forgive me. I'm so sorry. I thought Brent was a deep and awesome man, committed to me because he sang, "When I fall in love, it will be forever," and that you approved of our love, and that we had a love that soared to the heavens. What a stupid sucker I have been! I tried to do what was right, and I thought loving Brent was right because our love was so awesome. How he has disappointed me, and how I have disappointed you. But it appears the way I went about it was all wrong. I never should have returned his romantic feelings. I should have kept my correspondence with him purely platonic, and I never should have lost my head over this guy. Oh, Jesus, I'm so distressed for you. I have disgraced you by my foolish behavior with Brent. I sure have come a long way since those days that I trained for missionary service as a young lady, haven't I? Imagine, I turned down a chance to be an Air Force officer to go to Bible college, but now I'm guilty of adultery. Because I didn't turn down an evil Hollywood actor who made love to me on the phone as a married woman. All those horrible things I've heard about Hollywood from my church are true. How I've disgraced you, how I've let you down. Please forgive me. I'm so sorry. Oh, I should have known better. All the preachers warned me as a young lady about the Hollywood cesspool. Why did I ever doubt them? Why did I think Brent was different from mainstream Hollywood? Oh, I've made such a mess of my life. Please forgive me for disgracing you. I'll be wiser about Brent. I won't disgrace you any more about him. I'm so sorry, Jesus. Please forgive me. I'm so sorry. Out to the apartment dumpster she trounced, tossing the evil Paramount letter into the dumpster, her way of ending forever her communications with Brent. 12 hours after Gail prayed for that 3 hours, crying tears of shame and begging Jesus to forgive her, Jesus sent to Paramount Studios The Northridge earthquake. It hit Hollywood in the wee hours of the morning. Gail was not watching the news the day after her 3 hours of prayer, and when she went outside for a bit, around 4 in the afternoon on Monday, January 17th, 1994, her son came running to her. "Mommy, did you hear about the earthquake that just hit Southern California?" Gail rushed into her apartment to watch the news. Her Jesus had answered her 3-hour prayer from yesterday. The earthquake had hit Paramount Studios very early in the morning, before the sun came up, around 12 hours after she prayed for 3 hours in shame to Jesus. Her jaw dropped in disbelief. How could she, such an adulterous and sinful woman, get an answer to prayer like this? Jesus sent the Northridge earthquake to Paramount Studios. This was Jesus' message to Paramount for what they did to her. When Gail read the paper the next day, she learned that the only Hollywood people who died worked for Paramount Studios. Oh my God, Jesus! So this is the answer to my 3-hour prayer. I don't deserve such an answer. I've dreamed of making love to a man who was not my husband. It was Paramount Studios, not Brent, that sent her that FedEx letter. Brent would not give up his Gail, and when they ordered her not to write him any more, he got a wiretap on her phone and listened to her at all times with a device he used to hear all she said to him on her wiretapped phone. When she answered her phone around dinner time on January 17th, she heard strange beeps and noises on her phone. Brent's way of letting her know that he had obtained a wiretap on her phone and that she would no longer need to write him to communicate with him. While experiencing the earthquake himself, he wanted to let her know in his own way that he was okay and that he still cared for her and wanted to hear from her. That's why he wiretapped her phone! Because of Brent's wiretap on her phone, she only had to dial her own number and get a blank on her phone now to talk to Brent. She could now talk to the blank, and Brent would hear every word she said on the blank. Jesus seemed to tell her through the sermon she heard in church Sunday night on January 16, 1994, to never write Paramount again, and she never did. She promised Jesus she would obey him in this matter. She could now talk to Brent by dialing her own number and obtaining a blank. But the earthquake seemed to indicate that Jesus favored her somehow. It boggled her mind that she, such an adulterous sinner, could pray down an earthquake to Paramount Studios. How clever Brent is, she thought, because his wiretap of her phone enabled her to continue her communication with him despite their enemies, and she wouldn't need to communicate with Brent through Paramount anymore. All she had to do was pick up her phone, dial her own number, get a blank, and talk to Brent. But she knew that whoever her enemy was, they made Jesus very angry. Jesus did tell me to encourage Brent when I went to the funeral of that little girl in November 1992. I remember that. Yes, that was him who told me to keep loving Brent, to remain Brent's friend even though I was married, that everything was falling into some sort of divine plan. When I came back from that funeral and hit the random mode on my CD player, and that song Somewhere from West Side Story was the first song that played. Yes, Jesus really did speak to me then, when he told me in his still small voice, through the words of that song, "There's a place for us, somewhere a place for us, peace and quiet and open air, wait for us someday. There's a time for us, someday a time for us, time together with time to spare, time to look, time to care,